the things that we will do as readers is learn to recognize different genres. A genre is a category that's used to classify a text, usually by form or technique, but we're really going to focus on the content of what we're reading. And the two main categories we'll be sorting texts into are our nonfiction texts that provide that factual information about a subject, and our fictional texts, which are imaginary stories that are entertaining. Now, when we think of our nonfiction texts, the major categories or genres that we'll look at are informational texts, which is intended to inform, biographies, which are accounts of a person's life, and autobiographies, which are very similar in that they're an account of a person's life, but an autobiography, auto meaning self, is that it's written by that particular person. And then we will also examine memoirs. Memoirs are accounts told by the writer themselves, usually written in that first-person point of view. Now, when we think of our fiction texts, a major category that we're going to be exploring is fantasy. Fantasy is that imaginative fiction, and there are many texts that fall under this category because they feature these strange settings or extraordinary characters. We'll be looking at traditional fantasy and modern fantasy. Now, when we think about traditional, we explore traditional literature. Traditional literature are stories that were originally told by word of mouth, and they were passed down this way. In fact, the origins are before we ever had any type of printing or books were common. So traditional literature consists of tales that were pretty much a form of entertainment, and they also became those oral records of history and of customs of different types of peoples and cultures. Now, there are four main types of traditional literature that we'll focus on. We'll be looking at folk tales, mythology, fables, and fairy tales. We'll also examine some nursery rhymes because they're great to look at as we think about poetry. We'll read some historical fiction, and it's the type of fiction where characters are realistic, but it didn't really happen. And in historical fictions, the settings are in the past. Realistic fiction is another type of fiction where it could happen, but it's not based on anything that really did happen. Then we have adventure stories where exciting things happen, often involving some kind of a risk or danger, and that's really what drives the plot in that genre.